What's up YouTube, Dow here from Zephyr War Games, and today I am bringing you the deck of the hour, and that is of course branded Despia. So of course Despias have been given a massive boost as well as every other fusion archetype, but Despias with branded is probably going to be the most consistent version of this deck, and is definitely going to put in a lot of work in the upcoming months, at least until the new ban list, and keeping in mind Aluba as well has been confirmed as a reprint in Ghost from the past. If you want to see more from this particular deck, whether it be duels or test stands, smash the like button, get it up to 50 likes within the first 24 hours, and I will bring that video for you tomorrow. With all of that out of the way, let's dive headfirst into this competitive build for branded Despia. So of course you start off with triple Aluba. Now this is your main card, because this card, when it is normaled or specialed, it lets you add a branded spell or trap from your deck to the hand. So what that basically does is it lets you search out 90% of your spells and 100% of your traps that you are playing in this particular build. It also has an additional effect that if a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, while this card is in the graveyard, you can special summon this card back, target one monster and negate its effects, or target that particular monster. You can only use each effect once per turn, and you can only use one Aluba effect per turn, which basically means when you summon it back from the graveyard, you can't use its effect to search as well. Then of course we've got Fallen of Albaz, who is basically the counterpart to Aluba in this particular build. Fallen of Albaz is going to be used as fusion materials from the deck as many times as you possibly can, because you can cycle them back, you can banish them, you name it. It also has synergy with all of the other branded cards as well, specifically stuff like branded in red, because you get to target a Despia or a Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard and then proceed to do a fusion summon. So it's got the synergy. It basically continues the lore that has been going on since Rise of the Duelist, as I've mentioned before. So playing two is absolutely necessity. We'll then move on to the rest of the Despias, or Despians. So we've got the one Tragedy, the one Adlerbyten, and the one Drama. And then I will mention the last one in a minute after we've gone through these. So, Tragedy is if it is sent to the graveyard or banished via a card effect, you get to add a Despia monster from your deck to the hand. So basically if you use a Law of Darkness, if you use Branded Opening, because it doesn't discard as cost, it discards as an effect, you will get the ability to search, which basically means you're not losing anything when you do discard, and everything else included. Adlerbyten, if it is used as fusion material from the hand or field, you can, and ends up going to the grave or is banished, you can revive a level 8 or higher fusion monster that is in your graveyard, or I believe it is also a Despia monster. So you either get to revive a Despia monster or a level 8 or higher fusion monster that is banished or in the graveyard. So this is the great ability to recycle some of your cards, especially if you've banished them off of branded in red, or if you've been able to, if your opponent's like DD Crowed them, or if your opponent has Called by the Grave them, this gives you the ability to get them back and go again. Then you've got Dramaturge as well. So this one is if it is used as fusion material from the field or hand and is either in the graveyard or banished, you can special summon it back to the field. Now the best thing about that is it is a 3k beta, which is an absolute boss. It also has an additional effect that if a fusion, synchro, XYZ or link monster is special summoned, except during a damage step, you can target one effect monster on the field and negate its effects until the end of this turn. So that is really, really important as well, that it does have an on-field effect, so a lot of people will forget that. You can only use each effect of the Dramaturge and the Adlerbyten once per turn each, but with the Tragedy and Aluba, you can only use one of their effects, because the other effect of Tragedy is you can banish it from the graveyard to target a branded spell or trap in the graveyard and set it to the field. It's a shame it's not a quick effect, which basically means you'll be a turn late, unless you're going to drop this during your opponent's turn, and then you kind of go from there. Now the last card as well that we're putting on is the one Despian Comedy. Now I thought this card was just dead and buried, but it actually has a lot of uses now. So when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a face-up Despia card or cards you control, quick effect, you can discard this card and negate that effect. If this card is in the graveyard, quick effect, you contribute a fusion monster, special summon this card. You can only use the effect once per turn, and you can only use one effect per turn. Now the reason this is so good is because when you look at Albion and when you look at Lubellion, which we'll show a little bit more at the end as well, both of them are your go-to fusion monsters off of Branded Fusion. So the idea behind this is you would activate Branded Fusion. Ideally you're going to be sending, we'll go Lubellion route, you send Comedy and Albaz. That summons you out Lubellion. Now, through that ability, because you've got a Despia in the graveyard and you've got a Dark in the graveyard, you will choose to use Lubellion's effect, discarding a card in order to spin back materials from the graveyard to the deck in order to fusion summon a monster, which will, in this scenario, will be the Masquerade Dragon. If your opponent then goes Imperm or Veiler, you can, of course, chain Comedy in the graveyard, as it is a quick effect, to tribute that fusion monster and basically allow it to dodge that target ability and then continue to use its effect because the Lubellion effect is on summon. The same with the Albion as well. So that is why people are playing this, because it can be easily sent to the graveyard and it does give you that nice little bit of protection and loop ability from stuff like Veilers and Imperms. If the format shifts again and stuff like targeting effects like Veilers and Imperms are no longer a thing or become less relevant, you can very easily take this out, as this build is a 45 card deck. Carrying on with the new stuff we received in the structure deck, I've gone with 2 Spring Gun kits. I actually really like this card. So if you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material on the field, which 99% of the time you should do because that is the whole entire aim and goal of the deck, you can special on this card from the hand. If it is normal or special, you get to add to your hand one of your branded spells or traps that is banished or in your deck or graveyard, then place 1 card from your hand onto the bottom of the deck. So if you've opened up, let's say, for example, a Fusion Destiny piece, you can use the effect of Spring Gun's kit, add Branded Fusion, add Branded Condemnation, which is obviously now Retribution. You can add Branded in Red, you can add anything like that, and then put that brick back onto the bottom of the deck. So I really like this card. I think it's absolutely amazing, and the fact that it's just a free summon is also really cool. We've then got the Tri Brigade. Now it's Merry Courier. I like calling it Merry Carrier, doesn't really matter too much. But when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material, quick effect, you can send this card from the hand or face up on the field to the graveyard to negate that effect. If this card is banished, you can add from your deck to the hand 1 Fallen of Albaz or 1 monster that mentions it except itself. So keeping in mind that the Spring Guns kit mentions Fallen of Albaz in its text, so you are able to get that the following turn. So the idea would be that off of your Mirror Jade Dragon, whether you do it during your turn or your opponent's turn, you're going to send Brigade the Glory Dragon. This will then add you a Tri-Brigade monster, which will be the Merry Carrier, which becomes a hand trap. And then, of course, once you've activated this hand trap, if you were to banish it using Lubellion or anything like that, you'd get an additional search of kit. So it gives you a bit of synergy and it gives you a way to work around it. The last monster card is the Light Hex Seal. And basically this is a £3 common at the moment. The reason this is so good is it gives this deck the ability to make Dragoon. It also gives this deck the ability to make a very spicy tech. Thank you, Kyron, who has helped put this build together as well, to help extend your plays, give you options to alternative routes. And the best thing about getting Dragoon, as you'll see in the side deck as well, is it can protect you from your biggest weakness. Moving on to the hand traps. Triple Ash Blossom, you want to try and stop the Branded Fusion as much as possible. You might consider cutting this to 2 if you want to, and that would be if people are then going to start going heavy on the Gamma, because we're definitely playing Gamma. The thing that I really like about the Gamma package is, in theory, I can actually activate Branded Fusion and send the driver as material for my Albion, and the best thing about that is, I mean, I'll never draw a driver, which is great. But it obviously protects your Branded Fusion as well. It protects anything that will send from the graveyard. Anytime your opponent activates a monster effect, if they try to, I don't know, shotgun earlier, Lancia, don't know why you would against this deck, but maybe. And then any of the hand traps that they might want to try and stop you with, you can Gamma and deal with it. The reason that I would consider cutting the Ash down is because we're actually playing 2 Ghost Spell. Now again, this was an introduction from Kyron, so shout out on that. But the idea behind this is because people are now playing Comedy in order to dodge stuff like Imperm and Veilers, Ghost Spell might actually be better. The only weakness is that if your opponent chain blocks you, Ghost Spell becomes useless. But the idea is that both Lubellion and Albion move cards from the graveyard. You also look at stuff like DPE as well. Ghost Spell can be used on that. Being said, I have put some cards in the extra deck that I could even consider putting in the main deck, and I'll show you them when we get to it. So that's pretty much it for the monsters, apart from the possibly banned engine coming out or coming up. And that is, of course, leading into our spells as well, is the Destiny Hero package. So 1 Dasher, 1 Celestial, 2 Fusion Destiny. Like a free special summon in your draw phase, only once, keep that in mind. Draw 2, and then obviously one of the most powerful spell cards, because it can just be used at the end and go from there. Speaking of powerful spell cards, why Well, this is why the deck has now got a massive boost, because of this badass card right here, triple branded fusion. So you fusion summon one fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material from your extra deck, using 2 monsters from your hand, deck, or field as fusion material. You can't special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters the turn you activate this card. You can only activate it once per turn. Now, at the moment, we haven't, in my opinion, got an insane broken Albaz fusion monster. But I wouldn't put it past Konami giving us something like that in the future, whether it be near or far, when you look at stuff like DPE and Dragoon. At the moment, Mirror Jade is incredibly powerful, and then we do get a new one in Dimension Force, but that's obviously going to be used a bit more for contact fusing than anything. This card is nuts. I love it. I really want to see this as an ulti in the future, because I just think the detail on the artwork, like I think you've got Titaniclad there, and then you've got the Ice Jade there, or that might be Lubellion. It just looks absolutely incredible. I think even Lubellion might be at the bottom here, so I love it. Such a good card, and it's the reason this deck's going to spike. We then got triple branded opening, so you get to discard a card, not as cost, but as part of the effect, to then target a Despia monster from your, take one Despia monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it in defense. Also, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusions. You don't really care about that. If a fusion monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead. You can only use each effect once per turn. And like, again, carrying on with the artwork is absolutely amazing. Like, I can't wait to get an official lore on this with like the Tri-Brigades, the Spring Guns, the Despias, you name it. And then the next amazing spell card that they've got is branded in red. So both of these were not in the structure decks. They might be reprinted in Ghosts from the past, but they're more likely to be reprinted in the Megatins of this year. Branded in red, you target a Despia monster or Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard, add it to your hand, and then you can apply the following effect. Fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your hand or field, but it can't attack directly this turn. Why is that so good? Well, because it's a quick effect, it does let you do that during your opponent's turn, meaning you can get to Guardian Chimera, which is why Guardian Chimera is currently sitting at £50 a copy, because when it is summoned, especially if you've got branded Lost on board, your opponent can't respond to its effects, meaning that you're going to be able to draw 1 or 2 and pop 1 or 2 cards, depending on where you used the materials from. Speaking of branded Lost, and I wish it was kept as branded Paradise, again continues the theme of the amazing artwork. The activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated. Now keep in mind, it doesn't say the branded, it doesn't say the specifically Despia fusion spells, it basically says the activation of cards and effects that include an effect to fusion summon. It also means Fusion Destiny, people. It basically means if your opponent has this on the board and they try to fusion summon, you've got very few options in order to negate it. Cannot be negated. If your opponent cannot, also your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when a monster is fusion summoned this way. If you fusion summon a fusion monster, you can add Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it from the deck to the hand. So that's how you can get to Kit. That's also how you can get to the Mary Carrier as well. The best thing about this is it works exactly like Magical Meltdown, that if on summon I choose to use DPE's effect, my opponent cannot respond with like a Chalice, an Imperm, or anything, because they cannot respond when a monster is fusion summoned this way. So it's still within the summoning window, and as long as you declare to use the effect on summon, you're good to roll. If you don't declare to use it on summon and you go, okay, do something else and then activate DPE, it can be interrupted. Keep that in mind. The final kind of branded Despia, you name it, spell we are playing is the one Theatre of the Branded. So this one lets you fuse during your main phase a level 8 or higher fusion monster, using monsters from the hand or field as material. If a face-up non-fusion fairy monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, or is destroyed by battle, you can target a level 8 or higher fusion monster in the graveyard and special summon it. So it gives you recurability. Then we're going with the combat card in the deck right now, and that's Triple Super Poly. So not only will this help enhance your build and enhance your board, but it will also help you break your opponents and give you a very good go first, go second option. Keeping in mind that when you're using Albaz, you have a range of cards you can summon from the extra deck, some relating on type, some relating on attributes, some relating on attack stats. So it's incredibly powerful. You've just got to keep in mind that you do play a couple of cards that discard, so you need to be aware of that to make sure you always have a card in hand to trigger this. Speaking of going second as well, double Forbidden Droplet. I'm at this point where I'm like, well, I'm already discarding a lot And Super Poly, in my opinion, is better than Forbidden Droplet, because Super Poly, not only would it break my opponent's board for me, it also gives me a very good boss monster. So the best use of Droplet is activating something like Branded, and your opponent goes, okay, chain effect, and you go, right, chain Droplets to send this. That's kind of like the best use for it, which is why I've got 2 and not 3 at the moment. You could arguably put in Dark Rulers if you want to. And like I said, it's really dependent on how you want to build this deck. Do you want to build this deck going first or going second? Because it has that balance of both. And then the last card we play is one Branded Retribution. Again, artwork, incredible. This is probably my favourite, or maybe my second into Branded Fusion, for the pure fact that it's Irish Sword Soul versus Dramaturge, and then I believe it's also got another monster at the bottom, but I can't quite make it out. It might be Comedy, but it just looks absolutely incredible, so I'm happy this one got a foil print. So when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, so Branded Fusion, Shadow Fusion, you name it, return to the extra deck 1 face-up fusion monster you control, or 2 fusion monsters in your graveyard that mention Fallen of Albaz as material. And if you do, negate the activation, and if you do that, destroy the card. You can banish this card from the graveyard to target 1 branded spell or trap in your graveyard, accept itself, and add it to the hand. You can only use 1 effect of this card's name per turn. So obviously the idea behind this is, off of Mirror Jade, if you were to play the Dogmaticas, you're going to be filling up your graveyard with fusion monsters that you haven't actually correctly summoned. So you're going to have easy fodder in the graveyard to shuffle back in and go again. So that's it for the main deck. Just a quick shout out before I go to the extra deck. So obviously shout out to Kyron, Joe, and Rob, who's helped kind of put this deck together, but also shout out on the spicy tech of Darklaw with triple mask change. So this is just one of these options that I really, really like, but the thing is, it's quite restrictive to going first. Like, to get the most out of it, you want to go first, and again, you're adding a card that discards into the deck. So I would ideally be playing something like this to dodge the Imperms and the Veilers, but with the Albions and the Lubellians, to use Mask Change 2, you need to summon out a monster that is of a higher level. So you'd only be using these on a Lubers, maybe Alistairs if you played it. So it'll have more utility in the other kind of versions of this. So like I said, the Alistair version, the Shadow version, the Dogmatica version, but it's just a shout out I wanted to mention. Carrying on to the extra deck. So what we got in the structure deck, we are playing double Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon. This card is insane. It is probably the first Albaz fusion monster we got that provided us with an interruption, even if it is slightly hindered. It's 3000 attack. It requires Fallen of Albaz plus 1 fusion, synchro, XYZ, or link monster. You can only control 1 of the Ice Jade Dragon, and then once per turn, quick effect, you can send 1 fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard that mentions Fallen of Albaz in its material. Banish 1 monster on the field, non-target. You cannot use this effect the next turn. If this fusion summon card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls during the end phase of this turn. So that's kind of cool. It's like a delayed, Venom, which is really, really important. Then we play the 1 Albion, the 1 Lubellian, the 1 Brigade, and I kind of wanted to play the Spring Guns one, but ideally you don't need it. So you could even arguably cut this, but the reason for this is that it gives you consistency to get to the Merry Carrier. But if this was the Spring Gun one, to be fair, if you activate your Mirror Jade during your opponent's turn, send the Spring Gun, at least you'll then get the kit. And then you can special summon kit the next turn and then start making plays from there. So really, this is flexible. You could even bump up Lubellian to 2 if you want to. But the way I went with this is like, right, well, if I don't feel my opponent's got an Imperm or a Veiler, I'll go Albion. If I do, I'll go Lubellian and I can protect it with the Comedy. For the Despias, we've got 2 Masquerade, the Blazing Dragon. This card's just bonkers, like absolutely insane. Requires a Despia plus a light or dark monster, so it gives you the best of both worlds. And then while you control this fusion summon card, your opponent must pay 600 life points to activate cards or effects. This is not an activated effect, so it does work under Mystic Mine. And the best thing about that as well is it makes your opponent pay. So even if they were to activate Dark Ruler No More or Droplets, they technically have to pay before they continue to activate the cards. It's basically like, right, okay, pay 600, activate a card. Pay 600, activate a card. If you have 2, they're paying 1200, and they're pretty much not going to win from that point on. If your opponent controls a Ritual Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, or Link, while this is in the graveyard, quick effect, you can special summon this from the graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. The last one we've got is the Despian Quinteris. You can cut this if you want to, and I think for the weekend, this is probably going to get cut because it reduces all monsters except level 8 or higher fusion monsters to 0 attack as a quick effect during the main phase. So it would probably not work so great this weekend because a lot of, even your opponent is going to be playing level 8s or higher fusion monsters. So it's not going to do the most for you, which is why you would probably bump up other stuff like Guardian Chimera, which currently I've only put at 1. I do have a second, but I kind of felt like at this exact moment in time, until this defines itself, I feel 1 is enough. The only reason you want 2 is if your opponent stops the first, you want to kind of make a second. Now, why is this card rocketed in price? Well, quite simply, people, it requires 3 monsters with different names. It must first be fusion summoned using only fusion monsters or materials from the hand and field, which means it is not a super poly target because it has to use hand and field. It can't just use 3 on the field, and it can't just use 3 in the hand because it needs to use at least 1 monster from each. If it is fusion summoned by a spell card or effect, you can draw cards equal to the number of cards used as material from the hand, and if you do, destroy cards your opponent controls equal to the number of cards used as material from the field. You can only use each effect once per turn, and while Polymerization is in the graveyard, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. So the reason this is so good is if you've got branded Lost in play, your opponent cannot respond to this effect triggering. It means that they can't Ash Blossom you, and the best thing about this, and worst thing, is you need to be able to resolve both effects. You need to be able to draw to destroy. You need to be able to destroy to draw, I believe, as well. So if they Ash this, you don't really care about them not being able to target it because you just go, right, cool, it's just a 3300 beta now. So you do want to be able to protect this as all possible, and that's where Branded in Red comes in, and Branded Lost works really, really well. Then, of course, the annoying card of the hour again is Destiny Hero Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. Not much more needs to be said about that. And then the reason that we play the Light Hexil is Red Eyes Dark Dragoon and Blue Eyes Tyrant. Shout out to Kyron on this one. Again, this is flexible. It can be any card you want, but when I read its effects, you'll understand why we play it. So, the idea is that when you send the Light Hexil, it can become Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician, and then the other points are obviously going to be used as Albaz. The best thing about Dark Magician is it won't get its pop effects unless you specifically use Dark Magician, which you don't want to be doing, but it does become a discard Omni-Negate spellcaster, can't be targeted, can't be destroyed. So just an insane boss monster that your opponent needs to deal with, like a Towers. And then of course you've got Tyrant Dragon. Now what makes this so good is it kind of outs pretty much an Eldritch matchup. So, the way this works is unaffected by trap cards or effects. This card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each, and then once per turn at the end of the damage step, if this card battled, you can target a trap in your graveyard and set it to your field into the spell and trap zone. So that second effect is less relevant with our main deck because the only card we're going to be resetting will be the Condemnation or the Retribution, but the fact that it can pretty much just go, cool, punch through all of your opponent's monsters as a 3400 BR, which is stronger than Chimera, and then be unaffected by traps like Imperms, Veilers, Punishments. Veilers isn't a trap, but you know. Punishments, and if they flip a skill drain late, once this card is already on the board, it is unaffected, meaning it can still punch through everything. The last cards that we are playing are Super Poly targets. So you've got your Mud Dragon of the Swamp, you've got your Predaplant Dracus Depelio, and then of course you've got your Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Now obviously the reason that Starving Venom is so darn good is it requires 2 darks. But Dracus Depelio can be just as good because if your opponent goes, right, well, I'm going to try and play around Super Poly. I know my opponent is going to try and Super Poly me. I'm going to try and put 1 light, 1 dark on the board. Where you go, cool, Dracus Depelio, let's go. A lot of people are going to be using Destroy Phoenix. A lot of people are going to be using the Ice Jade. So you've obviously got a dark and a dark. So you're very good and open there. But if they should try and do anything special to dodge that, that's going to be their biggest weakness right now. Is Super Poly should just blow them out of the water. And then hopefully off the back of that, because your Super Poly is basically like a 2-card combo because it requires a discard, you'll still have 4 more cards to play with. And if any one of those cards is like a Fusion Destiny, a Branded Fusion, you're just going to continue to build a stronger board anyway. I'm also going to show you the extra deck as well. So with the extra deck, what we got in the structure deck was Triple D Barrier. I think this card's incredibly powerful. People considered non-fusion area, but the thing is that's a continuous trap. So if your opponent wanted to, they could chain to it. The best thing about this as well is if you know you're playing branded, you flip this during the draw phase, you call fusion, your opponent then has to respond with a super poly at that point, otherwise they're not going to be able to fuse or do anything with it, so it kind of protects you for the rest of the turn. And ideally, if you do call the barrier on a branded matchup, they're going to auto lose, give or take. Purely for this weekend and this weekend only, we've got triple cross out for the pure fact that I expect there to be a lot of mirrors. So you're going to be playing a lot of mirrors, being able to hit stuff like branded fusion when your opponent tries to play it, being able to hit stuff like Aluba or Albaz or anything like that that might cause you issues, Paradise, you name it, cross out will deal with it. We've then got the spice of double Secret Village. Now, why have we got Secret Village in here? Well, like I already mentioned, the biggest weakness of this deck is to get super polyed. How do you stop your opponent's super polying when you need to put something in place during your turn? Secret Village are the spellcasters. But wait, Dal, where's your spellcaster? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got the best spellcaster in the game in the extra deck. So you would be specifically going out of your way to go first. You would need to get to your Secret Village. You would need to get to a D-Barrier. Well, don't need to get to a D-Barrier, but just imagine D-Barrier plus this. Broken. And the way it would work is you'd go to the Albion play, you'd make your Dragoon, you'd activate this, and you'd be like, right, cool, my opponent's not super polying me, they're not going to be able to do anything, they're not going to get past my Omni-Negative Dragoon, pass, let's go. That's used 2 cards, I believe. So I've still got 3 more cards in hand. I'm going to draw my 4th for turn. I can then build my board and go for the OTK because I'm going to get the strongest spellcaster on the board. Carrying on, we do have some back row hate in the form of double Cosmic Cyclone alongside double Forbidden Chalice and double Nibiru, the Primal Being. Now, I've actually got a 16 card extra deck at the side card at the moment because there's a card that I was like, I really want to put it in and I just need to find space for it. So Nibiru could probably be cut on this, and if I was to cut this, I'd actually be putting probably Cosmic up to 3, but I would also consider putting DD Crow up to 3. Now, the reason that I feel DD Crow is going to be really, really good this format is when they activate Branded Fusion, they have to go into Lubellion or they have to go into Albion. Now, in both those scenarios, they need Albaz in the graveyard to make anything. So why try and Veiler or Imperm your opponent when they could just go Comedy and Protect? Why try to Ghost Bell when they could possibly Chain Block? When you could very easily just go DD Crow, target and remove. Now, obviously, this is all null and void under Paradise Lost or Branded Lost, but the idea is that a DD Crow on a Fawn of Albaz can actually be heavily damaging for your opponent, and it will definitely make the Lubellion or the Albion fizzle because they won't then have the Albaz in order to target. They would then be forced in order to make something different, which would mean that if they were trying to go for the Dragoon play, you'll know that because they will send the Light Hexil. You'd probably choose to DD Crow the Hexil, but otherwise it would force them to do Hexil plus Albion. So there's a lot that you need to consider. Keep in mind as well that Merit Jade is a worm, so it's not a dragon as such. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much it. I'm going to continue to be working on this deck. I know Kyron is as well. And I know a lot of people at my locals, including Charlie, will be as well. As it is an incredibly powerful deck. It's got some very cool involvement, some very cool synergy with the rest. And I can't wait to see what this deck does in this upcoming format. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Like I said at the start, if you want to see more from this, like a test stand video or combos, then make sure you smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe. I'm also going to show you the tokens right at the end. You've probably already seen these. You've got Albaz the Shrouded, Ecclesia the Exiled, the Tri-Brigade one. Really wish these were foil. The Virtuous Vestals, and then probably one of the best ones is the Aluba, the Dogmatic. I absolutely love this, and I would have loved to have seen this in foil because I reckon the stained glass in the back would have had to look absolutely amazing. And then it also has a little bit about the lore as well. So, a thing separated from the abyss, it mocked the light and deceived the darkness. Like, amazing. So, if you haven't picked these up yet already, go do so. The deck is incredible. And then, like I showed you in my video yesterday, there are plenty of budget options should you not want to go all in on something like this just yet. Anyway, as absolutely always, guys, stay safe and happy dueling!